Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I have another book haul. I actually went to the bookstore yesterday evening during the pandemic, the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Wanted to get some more books, and I had a few in mind that I wanted to get, but of course, as is custom, I ended up getting more than I thought I would. So, again, no tripod, by the way. I still have just my hands right now, so I'm sorry for the sloppiness of that setup, but it'll just have to do for now. So yeah, I wanted to show you what I got. I didn't get too much, thank God, but I did get a few books. So the first book I got was Me Ultima, which I've actually never read before. I'm familiar with it. Obviously, it's a classic read, but I've never read it before. And what prompted me to get it is I'm currently reading a young adult Aristotle, Discover the Secrets of the Universe, or maybe it's Aristotle and Dante, but I think it's Dante and Aristotle, Discover the Secrets of the Universe. And in that book, which is, by the way, it's a Latino book. It was written by a Latino author, and the characters are Latino. So yeah, it's something that I'm making my way through. Excuse me while I drink out of my Ouija board mug. But what I wanted to say was basically in that book, he talks very compellingly about Bless Me Ultima and other things too. He has a lot of the author has a lot of recommendations for like poems. I love when writers do that, by the way. I don't know if you've noticed. I'm sure you have in your reading. You'll have the author insert kind of like books or poems or works that they admire, but they'll do it in a way where characters are sort of reading into that, and it's usually something that's applicable to the story, thematically applicable. Or maybe not, maybe it's just thrown in there, you know. I know Stephen King actually does that quite a bit for contemporary writers, and I'm sure many writers do the same thing. They sort of like pay homage to other books or influential works by mentioning them in their own book. And so Bless Me Ultima was one of the books that he recommended. It's a Chicano writer, Rudolfo, Anaya. I'm sure most of us had to read it in school. I did not, unfortunately, so I've never read it before. I actually don't even know what it's about. I know that they made a movie about it a few years ago, or a movie adaptation that I don't think got really great reviews, but I'm very interested to read Bless Me Ultima because I am Chicano, I am Latino, so I feel like this is something that I should definitely read. The other book that I got, and you're probably gonna laugh at me when I show you, is Hot Zone by Richard Preston. Hot Zone is the story of the Ebola outbreak back in I'm not sure what the year was, but it's goes back to the origins of the Ebola outbreak, and this book is sort of like one of the essential pandemic literature books. It's a science book. It's a true story. It's not a fiction book. And it says up here, the terrifying true story of the origins of the Ebola virus. And you can see the reviews are all very colorful in the sense that they highlight how scary this is. It says USA Today, this work of nonfiction is more terrifying than any sci-fi nightmare. And then I think quite famously, Stephen King wrote a blurb, but then Stephen King writes like lots of blurbs, but he wrote a blurb that says, one of the most horrifying things I've ever read. What a remarkable piece of work. And coming from Stephen King, that might mean something to you horror hounds out there. I think I've read the opening for this book, and if you like stuff like, you know, I know right now that there's sort of a thrill to, well, there is, it's not even sort of, there is a thrill to that sort of like pandemic fiction, pandemic literature, stuff like The Stand, stuff like you can even throw in movies like Outbreak, or movies like the more recent one with Gwyneth Paltrow that everyone's talking about, Contagion. So that kind of paranoid, atmosphere where people like the touch, you know, you're hyper aware of touch and just the different ways that viruses can spread. This book is probably right up your alley. So it's a meaty book. Again, it's nonfiction. This is nonfiction, or I should say probably more creative nonfiction, specifically, and it's a science book. You can find it in the science section of the bookstore. But yeah, and he has another book quite recently that talks about another Ebola outbreak, the more recent one. I think it's the deadliest Ebola outbreak. I forgot the name of the book, but you'll see it there in the science section, and it's a hardback book. I don't believe it's been released on paperback yet, to my knowledge, but it's more recent. This book was published in, I want to say it was published in the 90s. Excuse me, this book was published in 1994 was when this book was published. So it's an older book, but during this time period, it might be, it might take on fresh, horrible life. So that was my thinking there. I did want to get this book. In terms of classics, I'm trying to read more classic literature. I recently read Emma, and I'll be talking about that on my channel, but another book that I want to read is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. So I've never read this before, and this is going to be on my list. This is one of the books of 2020 that I really want to get into and finish. So Jane Eyre, that's something I want to get into. And this is the reason I went to the bookstore. The whole reason I went yesterday evening and by the way, Barnes & Noble does curbside service. I don't know if you know that. I'm sure if you're a reader, you do. Bookstores like Barnes & Noble, but specifically Barnes & Noble, you order online the book that you want and then go pick it up, and they'll come out to your car, so you don't even have to get down. You just drive up and they'll bring the book to you. But the book I wanted to get was How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan, and you'll recognize Michael Pollan's name as the author of The Omnivore's Dilemma. So yeah, he's a famous, I guess you would call him a sociologist, a social scientist. He talks about food, about biology, about a lot of different topics, and so very well-regarded, well-renowned author. And so this book, it's from 2018. It was on my radar, but I've just never gotten around to picking it up. But the book is about psychedelics and how the new science of psychedelics can possibly have breakthroughs for things like addiction, depression, and spiritual application. So that just seemed like such an interesting topic to me. So I decided to pick up that book. So those are my books. Those are the ones that I got. I got Bless Me Ultima, The Hot Zone, Jane Eyre, and Michael Pollan's How to Change Your Mind. So that's my book haul. As you can see, I'm all over the place in terms of my preferences for books. And that's just a few. I was actually going to get some more, but I had to cut myself off and say no. I have my reading list is already far too big. So a little bit at a time, trying to hold back, trying to save some money, but for now this will definitely keep me busy. But yeah, look forward to making new videos about each of these books and what I thought about them. So if you'd like, share in the comments about what you're reading. I'd love to know if you have any recommendations. If you've read any of these books, I'd love to know what you thought about them. And if you have any recommendations for further reading about either pandemic books or maybe even Latino, Chicano literature, Latinx literature, or books about psychedelics. I'm also interested in that too. So thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I look forward to making new videos. Thanks.